Hi, I'm Roxanne Richardson, and this is the Casual Friday podcast. In this week's podcast, I have tidbits, a finished item, and a work in progress. I'll also be talking about preparing for Finish It February. So let's get started. This tidbit came to me from Joanne on Instagram. It's an article about Maya Jones, a student at the University of Pittsburgh studying theater arts and history with a minor in French. Maya got a $4,000 Creative Arts Fellowship grant to research and make a garment inspired by Marie Antoinette and Parisian socialite Madame de Pompadour. According to the article, the dress is on display at the Archives and Special Collections Gallery and detailed via its digital interactive wall in the University of Pittsburgh Library System's Hillman Library on the 3rd floor until August 2024. I have learned a lot from my project to knit a sweater from each decade, from the 1890s to the 1990s, as well as my current project to knit socks and stockings from different centuries and decades. And it looks like Maya's learned an incredible amount as well. She's only 20 years old, so what an amazing opportunity to be able to explore something so deeply and have the resources to create a gown like this. I'll leave a link to the article down in the show notes. So if you live in the Pittsburgh area, let me know if you get a chance to go see the gown in person. As a side note, it took me a while to figure out how to see more photos of Maya's process and of her gown. But if you click on the lower right-hand corner of the photo in the article, you will see that there are actually 7 photos to look at, and they will take up your whole screen once you click on that. This tidbit came to me from Sam, my future son-in-law. It's a video about Roman dodecahedrons and what they were used for. Here's how Wikipedia defines a Roman dodecahedron. A Roman dodecahedron, or Gallo-Roman dodecahedron, is a small hollow object made of copper alloy which has been cast into a regular dodecahedral shape. 12 flat pentagonal faces, each face having a circular hole of varying diameter in the middle, the holes connecting to the hollow center. Roman dodecahedra date from the 2nd to 4th centuries AD, and their purpose remains unknown. They rarely show signs of wear and do not have any inscribed numbers or letters. So there's been a lot of speculation over the years that these dodecahedra could be used to knit small circumference tubes, and that the reason there are different size holes is in order to knit the fingers of gloves. The video that Sam sent me shows somebody using a dodecahedron to do this. And when Sam sent me this video, he had just learned to knit and wondered what I thought about that idea of using these dodecahedra to do that. My feeling is that just because you can use something for a specific purpose doesn't mean that is what it was created for or how it was used. So I think that it's unlikely. I had heard of these Roman dodecahedra before in the past, but Sam's question got me searching around again just to see what other ideas people might have come up with for these objects. And I came across a different video made by a knitter who had heard this claim before about using them for glove fingers. And while she was at a museum looking at a display of Roman jewelry, she had a eureka moment. Given that the dodecahedra were made of bronze, and given that they are usually found with valuable items like gold coins and jewelry, it's possible that they could have been used to make gold braid jewelry using a technique often referred to as Viking knitting. So I'll leave links to both videos down below. The idea that this woman has, this knitter who had the eureka moment, the idea is that you start with some wire that is intertwined to create a braided tube with a smaller circumference, but then you can draw it through the various holes, which are different sizes, in order to compress it down into a smaller and smaller circumference, as well as to lengthen it. The creation of the wire that's used to make the braided jewelry would have required drawing the wire itself through smaller and smaller holes in order to create the pliable thin wire that's used to make the braid. So it does make sense that something similar but handheld could be used by the jewelry maker to create this braid that gets more and more compressed. It's an interesting idea, and it's one that I think is more likely than making knitted glove fingers. But if you guys have an opinion about what they might have been used for, let me know down in the comments. This tidbit came to me from Judith on Ravelry. It's a video on how to make death head buttons. Death head buttons are a type of thread button where thread is wrapped around a button mold. Typically, it's some sort of wooden disc with a hole drilled through the center. And the way that the thread is wrapped around the button creates this hourglass shape. Death head buttons are just one type of thread button. Another popular type was the Dorset button, and those are made with a ring rather than a disc, and they produce a result that looks like a wheel. There's lots of different types of thread buttons. They're a fascinating thing to look into. I was having trouble understanding the person that was demonstrating the death head button making process in the video that Judith sent. He has quite a low voice, and there's music playing in the background, which made it harder for me to hear what was being said. So I did find another video on the same topic by Gina B. Silkworks. She has tutorials on a variety of thread buttons on her channel if you find that you are fascinated by all those intricate designs that you can get from wrapping thread around a disc or a ring. I've always been fascinated by thread buttons, so someday I'm going to make my own buttons for a hand knit cardigan or maybe a sewn item, and maybe I will do that this year. Maybe that will be one of my goals for this year, is to make thread buttons for something that I knit or sew. I was nearly finished with this in the last episode of Casual Friday. The problem I had was finding a zipper that would work with this. I had been looking for a zipper with metal teeth. I actually had several of them in different colors. The zipper tape was in different colors, and none of them worked because the teeth were brass. And I realized that because I was using a silver colored silk mohair combined with the worsted weight wool I was using as the main color, that the gold, the brass color, just clashed with this neck. And so what I was looking for was something like a brushed nickel, and I was having a terrible time. You can find brass pretty easily. Mostly they're used for pant zippers, and you could find some that were longer, but I had a real difficulty finding anything like a brushed nickel. I could find aluminum that looked really like awful, and I didn't think it would look good with this. Several people were concerned about me using a metal zipper at all because they said, well, that's going to be really cold against your skin, and there was never any intent for the zipper to be against my skin because it's meant as an extra layer between my regular clothes and my parka for when I go on my evening walk. So it can get really cold here in Minnesota. It hasn't gotten particularly cold yet. We're having a very mild winter. It's starting to get a little bit colder, more like winter temperatures. I did wear this under my coat last night to see how it worked. It was nice and cozy and warm, and I really like it. I want to go to the overhead though and kind of show you some of the details about the zipper. This is the first time that I've ever installed a zipper into knitted garments. I've installed zippers in sewing projects before when it was woven fabric. I've only had one other project where the intent was to put a zipper in it, and even though it only took me 2.5 weeks to knit the sweater, I spent 1.5 years off and on trying to figure out how to do the zipper, and I never could manage it. So I ended up not doing the zipper and just putting a clasp in at the top. So I really felt like it was time for me to do something with a zipper, and this was a perfect project for it. So let's go to the overhead and I'll show you some up-close features of this particular project. So the zippers that I bought initially were these brass ones, and I bought a couple of different colors. I actually felt like the zipper tape was a little bit too dark, but often it's okay to have something darker than like your thread because then it kind of recedes more. So when I bought these plastic ones, I bought one with this color zipper tape and then one with this lighter color tape, which you can't see because it's hidden inside the, there, you think you can see it a little bit there. I think this ended up being a good match for it. The pattern calls for buying a zipper that's at least 30 centimeters, or like here in the US it would be a 12-inch zipper, and then you shorten it as necessary. And as I was looking up information on videos about how to shorten a sweater, zipper, especially like a metal one, it's different than like if you have a nylon zipper where you can just sew across the bottom and then cut it off. For this metal type of zipper, instead, they want you to keep the length at the bottom, and then you remove the zipper stop and teeth at the top until you get down the length you want, and then you have to put the zipper stops back in. So it looked kind of tricky. When I ended up ordering this plastic one instead, because I could get something that was the right length in the right color, I couldn't find anything that was brushed nickel that was long enough. Everything was too short or just didn't exist in brushed nickel. So I was able to get this, and I looked up how to shorten this kind because these are plastic teeth. These are thicker teeth than the little nylon zippers that you'd use for like a dress or something. And it was the same thing where you remove the things on the top until you get it short enough, and then you put in a new zipper stop at the top. And I thought, oh, okay, this is going to complicate everything. But I had in my head that I was going to need to install it starting at the bottom and going up to the top. And then I remembered that Petite Knit, that's the designer, has video tutorials associated with the pattern. And there was one on how to install the zipper. And they did it completely differently than what all of these YouTube videos that are just talking about how you deal with this kind of a zipper. Instead, they had you keep it at the top, and you pinned things in and sewed them down most of the way until you got to about here, and then you made sure everything would zip and unzip correctly. And by that time, you would know exactly how much extra zipper you need. You get about 3 centimeters, a little more than an inch of the facing comes down here. And so then you can figure out how long it needs to be. And they just did the same thing that I would do with a nylon zipper, which was they created, you know, they created a bar tack, I think that's what you call it, across the teeth like 20 times, and then cut through it. They were using an old pair of kitchen shears in order to cut between the metal parts of the metal zipper. And I did that too. I went down to my kitchen and I cut it off. It worked really well. It didn't hurt the scissors, and I got the length I needed, and it was so much easier. So I just followed the instructions in the designer's video, and I got a result that I really liked. So let me show you on the inside. So on the inside, there is this facing that you would knit that went down to here, and then you joined it across and you knit it all the way. And so this got sewn down all around the edges with the mohair that you used with the other color as well. So, so I'm really pleased with this. I like it a lot. I might even end up using it up here in my office when it starts to get really cold. My desk is right next to a big window, and it can just radiate really cold weather when the temperatures are sub-zero Fahrenheit. It doesn't matter if I have a heater running, it doesn't matter if we have central heat on. Next to that wall, it gets very cold. So sometimes I end up putting an extra sweater on or something just for extra warmth. And this might come in handy for that if it ever gets cold here in Minnesota. So for my work in progress, I have been knitting this sweater. It's called Royale by Glenna C. I bought this pattern maybe 10, 11 years ago, and I've always wanted to knit it and never have. You can still buy the pattern on Ravelry. She hasn't posted anything on Ravelry for 8 years, and her website domain doesn't work anymore. So I don't know that you could get pattern support from her if you needed it. It's a really good design. There are a few issues that I'll talk about in a little bit. Some of the shaping numbers are wrong or just not quite right. But let me stand up and I'll kind of show you what this looks like so far. Okay, so you can see a little better now. So here's what the body looks like. I got my mic pack back here. So it's the same on the front and the back. It has a waist shaping up on the side. There's more room in the hips than there is in the bust, but you could always alter that if you wanted. Let me show you the arm. The sleeve is going to fit really nice in there as well once I get that sewn in. There are two options for the neck. I have one that I think she calls it the modest scoop, and then there's one that's a really deep scoop where you certainly have to wear something underneath it unless you wanted to give everybody a show. I was really worried about this before I did the neckband because I thought this is so low, but the neckband is actually quite a bit deeper than you would typically see for like a crew neck thing. So it really did fill in the area. It is more open and exposed than I normally want for a winter sweater. I usually do wear a t-shirt underneath it. We'll see how I feel about that. Again, it's been kind of a mild winter, so I don't know that I need the extra layers, but I'm really loving this so far. I thought when I first was knitting this that this pattern had been discontinued, but it's just been discontinued from one source. It still is available on Ravelry, but the designer herself hasn't been on Ravelry for 8 years and her website no longer works. So she says, you know, for pattern support, and she has an email that is associated with her website, I believe. Could be wrong, but I think that's what it is. So I don't know that you could get it. I'm leaving pretty extensive notes in my Ravelry project. So if this is something that you wanted to tackle, I have notes about where to look for possible errors in shaping. And then just slight changes, things that I made that were slightly different from what she said to do in the pattern. You could do what she said in the pattern and it would be absolutely fine. It's just little things that that I might like to do that are a little bit different than what she is presenting in the pattern. So let's go to the overhead and I can kind of show you up close some of the details, particularly about the neckline. So if this is a pattern that you are considering doing, I'll just tell you where to keep a lookout in a couple of different places. And I do have some pretty extensive notes in my Ravelry project page. And I always link to my project page down in the show notes anytime I'm showing a particular project. One of the places that there was something hinky was at the underarm for the sleeve. So for the body underarm, there's 11 stitches that you get rid of. And you get rid of an odd number because the left filler stitches, there's one stitch more than there is on the right here. And that's just to create symmetry in the stitch patterns. So in order to maintain symmetry going up, you eliminate like 6 stitches on this side and 5 stitches on this side, and then everything works out. So the main thing is there's 11 stitches for the underarm. For the sleeve, she only had 10 stitches. And I couldn't understand why you wouldn't have the same number. And the second thing was that it was off center. It wasn't centered correctly. And I thought briefly, I wonder if that was intentional. Some people who are really expert sewers, like couture type sewers, when they have something with a sleeve cap like this, rather than centering it exactly up here, it will be slightly forward. And I thought maybe that's what she was doing. But I really couldn't tell by looking at the photos, and there was no note because this is not something you would normally do in a sweater. I've never seen a pattern that actually called for doing that. As I said, some knitters who are really expert at fitting sewn things might do that, but I've never seen it in knitting patterns myself. And if anybody has, I'd love an example. It just didn't seem likely. It was just weird, and I noticed it was off for all of the different sizes. So that's something to look out for. The other thing was that there's these at the same time decrease instructions, which very common. It can be very confusing for people. I just write myself a little list. Row 1, decrease at armhole and neck. Row 3, decrease at neck only. I just keep track of what I have to do where. And she said, once you're done with all of those decreases, you'll have 16 stitches. But if I had actually done all of those decreases, I would have only had 15. And I needed 16 because I was doing a 3-needle bind off with the other shoulder. I didn't realize until I was pretty far up here, I've been long done with the decreases here, that she had one too many decreases at the underarm. And so I had one less filler stitch on this side, or this edge, than I had over here. So what I did was I just didn't do the last neck decrease because I was already up here. And the reason I decided to do that instead of ripping back and redoing the necks and doing all of the neck decreases. This hasn't been blocked, and so it's hard to tell, but when this is worn, you'll see that at the edge here, this pattern is kind of waving right here. And if I did all of the neck decreases, instead I'd have 2 parallel lines of twisted knit stitches all the way up. And I really didn't want that. I thought it would be better to have this little curve. You might not agree, so if you happen to make this sweater in this size, you can make your own decision. Well, what that did mean, I got an aesthetic choice I preferred for the front of the neck, which I think is going to be fairly visible to people looking at me wearing it. But what that meant was that when I joined the sleeves, there was this 1 stitch offset because I have 1 stitch fewer in the filler over here. It's just everything's offset a little bit. I could have ripped it back. I realized the issue when I was, somewhere up here. I just decided to make that choice. So that's, a couple of places where I think shaping isn't quite right. Then there were just some decisions that I made myself. She did say that when you start to work the neckline, to do the same thing that you had done down at the hem, which was to do these 2-stitch twists for the duration of the ribbing, like you had done down there, and to mirror that up there. So I had to, kind of adjust the pattern a little bit at that point to make this happen. And I think the rest of it was supposed to be just in twisted rib, but the back of the neck, there's a fairly wide horizontal. And so this was all bound off. So after I picked up stitches, I just continued these cables going up as well. Kind of makes up for having this shoulders be a little askew, but it's just something that pleased me. And it would have been fine with just twisted rib all the way across. It's just something that I wanted to do for myself. So again, if this is a pattern that you're interested in, I do have some pretty extensive notes on my project page on Ravelry for this particular sweater. This episode of Casual Friday is the first episode of season 7. My very first Casual Friday was published in the very first week of January in 2018. I didn't really know what Casual Friday was going to be or how long I would have ideas for videos that weren't technique demonstrations, but I did know that in February of 2018, I would host Finish It February for the first time on my channel, and I have continued to do that every year since. So if you're new to the channel, Finish It February is an opportunity to address your UFO pile, your unfinished objects. It's one part reminding yourself of the existence of your various UFOs and one part decluttering. I am a very out of sight, out of mind person, so the first time that I pulled out all of my UFOs back in 2016, I was shocked that I had more than 40 of them. There was like 43 or 44. Some of them were more than 10 years old. I had just forgotten about them. Some of them, even after looking at them, I had no memory of knitting them. Most of them were projects that I liked and I did want to finish. I just needed to be reminded of them. And others were projects that I hated and wanted no part of. And then there were some that I had ambiguous feelings about. So maybe maybe the project was a cute idea, but it was tedious to knit, or maybe I liked the knitting, but I had negative emotions associated with it. There are a lot of reasons to feel ambiguous about projects and the prospect of completing them. But that year in 2016, I decided to finish as many of those projects as I could. Not as a punishment, not because I felt I should, not because I felt guilty, but because I wanted to. I love knitting and I wanted that process of tackling those UFOs to be fun. So I found ways to keep myself interested by rotating through projects in different ways. I did allow myself to start new projects here and there if they were gifts and if they were something small that I could finish in a short time. My goal was to reduce my UFO pile, not end up adding more things to it. So it was during this year of finishing things that I first heard about the concept of Finish It February. Somebody on Ravelry mentioned that they devoted February, the shortest month of the year, to finishing things in their UFO pile. And then when March came around, they switched back to casting on new projects. So in 2018, a year after I'd finished more than 30 of my UFOs, I once again addressed my UFO pile, and I did it on this channel. Once again, I was surprised at how big the UFO pile was, and once again, there were several projects I'd completely forgotten about. My plan in 2018 wasn't to work through the entire pile before I could cast on anything new. It was just to work on UFOs through the month of February. The amazing thing about doing this once a year and knowing that I will be doing it every February is that it gives me permission to put a project that I'm bored with or frustrated with in a timeout. Knowing that in February, I will pull it out again and be in a better frame of mind to work on it at that point. I won't just put it to the side and forget about it because it will come up again in February. Over the years, my UFO pile got smaller and smaller, and I started using February not just to finish things, but also to fix things. I might sew new buttons on an old cardigan or add a belt and belt loops to a sweater coat that didn't have any closures in the front, or add patches to the elbows of a sweater that were getting thin. I even once re-knit a neckline that on a sweater that I loved except for the neck, and now I love it. So these are all things that I've done in Finish It February. If you're interested in Finish It February, you can get started by pulling out all of your UFOs and then going through them one by one. Do you like this? Will you enjoy knitting it? Do you want it once it's finished? If so, it goes in the yay pile. If not, it goes in the nay pile. But if you're really not sure, it goes into the pile of ambiguity. So for the things in your yay pile, the things that you're enthusiastic about, the things that you want to knit, figure out what is actually left to be done on it, and then estimate how long you think it might take to finish. So I'll often break a project down into sub-projects. There's sock 1 and sock 2. There's the right sweater front, the sleeve number 1, sleeve number 2, the neck and button bands. These are all separate sub-projects. Those give me some tangible milestones toward completing the larger project, but it also gives me natural points where I can take a break from that project in order to work on another one if that's going to help hold my interest along the way. So you can give yourself some rough goals after you've evaluated that for which projects you actually want to work on in February. I usually start with the projects that have the least amount of work to do, like weaving in a couple of ends on a hat or washing and blocking something. That allows me to see quick progress in reducing my pile and allows me to cross things off my list. And I like to give myself a mix of things to do to keep myself entertained. I might start the month with one sweater sleeve, work on finishing a sock, fix or mend something, and then end the month with the second sleeve. rather than having to do two sleeves in a row. Think about the reality of your own knitting personality and work with that, rather than coming up with this overly ambitious plan for a fantasy version of yourself. The goal is to reduce your UFO pile. And if you do something toward that, then you will have succeeded. In the next Casual Friday, I'll talk about what to do with your nay pile, as well as that pile of ambiguity. And just so that you know, there will be a couple of discussion threads in my Ravelry group that are devoted to Finish It February. One will be a chat thread where you can share what you intend to do. You can post photos of your entire pile of UFOs, or just of the things that you intend to finish or fix. You can share your progress throughout the month, and you can encourage each other along the way. Essentially, this is a bring your own knitting, knit along. There will also be a second discussion thread, except it's not really for discussion because it's a no chat thread. When you finish something, you can post a photo of it to this no chat thread. You can tell us something about the project's history, like how many years it's been in your UFO pile. You could tell us the pattern name and the yarn if you remember it, any information about the project itself. And by posting your photos in that thread, you're giving me permission to share those photos in a Casual Friday montage after Finish It February is over. You are not obligated to post in that thread. In fact, you're not obligated to post in the chat thread either. You can participate in Finish It February on your own in whatever way works for you. Some people use Finish It February to go through their stash and get rid of yarn that they will never use. You can use it as you please. Some people aren't able to work on UFOs in February because they have other commitments, but they like the idea of dressing their UFO pile and might do Finish It April. Or I've even seen people who have committed to do Finish It Fridays, and they just, on Fridays, they work on an old UFO, and the rest of the week they can work on any new thing that they want. However you want. I will put links to those discussion threads down in the show notes. In addition to the Ravelry discussion thread, I'll also link to some of the previous videos about Finish It February, so you can see what it's all about down below. Well, that's it for this week's Casual Friday. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below, or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.